Welcome to Policy Over Politics, a web series created by Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response, also known as STAR. I am your host, Morgan Lamondre, STAR's Policy and Compliance Director. Through my time at STAR over the past several years, I have worked closely with lawmakers in the Louisiana Legislature to improve the rights and protections for sexual assault survivors and implement prevention initiatives throughout the state. With this web series, I will take you behind the scenes as I talk with legislators about their important work and discuss how change is made in Louisiana. And today, for our first Policy Over Politics interview, I am thrilled to have as my first guest, State Representative Ted James from Baton Rouge. And last week, it was announced that Representative James will be leaving his legislative position for an appointment by President Biden to become the new SBA administrator for Region 6. So I do want to start by congratulating you on that. That's a great accomplishment. But for those of us who don't know you and your legislative work, can you kind of give us a brief overview and background about yourself and the work you've done in the legislature?
Sounds good. Thank you, Morgan. Happy New Year to you, and Happy New Year to those folks that are STAR advocates and STAR supporters. I've enjoyed working with you all over the past several years in the legislature. I'm out. I'm leaving. It was not an easy decision. I have really enjoyed working in the legislature. I'm in my third and final term. So if I hadn't resigned, the Constitution was going to kick me out anyway. And prior to that, I graduated law school in 2006 and immediately started working. Well, after the bar, working for former Governor Kathleen Blanco as a policy advisor. And then when Governor Jindal took office, I worked in the legislature as a staff attorney. So I was the staff attorney for the House Labor Committee. And then I left the legislature to go work for the Department of Revenue. So I was confidential assistant to the secretary doing a lot of her legislative work and really pulling together all the policies for Department of Revenue. Ran in 2011, right after redistricting. So after our last redistricting session, Baton Rouge gained a seat in the legislature, and I resigned from Department of Revenue to run for that seat. And have ran and been unopposed the second and the third times that I ran. I've been on my first term, I was on appropriations, judiciary, and natural resources. My second term, I was on ways and means, criminal justice, and labor. And this term, I am the chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee, as well as the chairman of the Louisiana Legislature Black Caucus. So I've worked on several different committees. Over the past few years, I've done a lot more criminal justice reform and police reform. I did a lot of tax work when I was on that committee. Last year filed some tax bills, but decided to put my bills on the shelf and allow some of our freshman legislators, Representative Hughes and Matt Willard and Representative Duplessis, they took the charge and really pushed a lot of our tax policy. I am very proud of the work that we've been able to do. I worked a lot with medical marijuana. I was one of the first before it became all cool and everybody jumped on board. And I think that, ironically, the bill that I probably get the most questions or comments about is the bill that created LA Wallet. So the digital driver's license, that is something that I worked on several years ago, and we've been able to kind of advance that. And now never thought we'd be using it during a global pandemic, but we have seen how useful the LA Wallet app is. And a lot of the work, we get a lot of credit, Morgan, for carrying these bills, but because you're a staple at the Capitol, that the credit goes to you all, the advocates, because you bring us different ideas. And unfortunately, with the type of work that you do, you bring us some experiences that are not happy experiences. So I have tried to really listen to the advocates and be more I guess, motivated and pushed by advocates and less by lobbyists. The lobbyists, of course, have a place, but they are paid to have positions, and those positions change based on who's paying them. And the work with advocates, especially at STAR and those criminal justice advocates, a lot of those ideas are coming from experiences. And I know that the best piece of legislation is one that is developed from an experience and trying to correct a lot of the wrongs that we have in our great state.
Well, and you're bringing up so many points that I kind of want to dive into a little bit deeper, but in particular, you're currently the chair of the Black Caucus. And I kind of want to give you a couple of different statistics related to the Black Caucus and the work that they've done with STAR, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So STAR has done 3 legislative scorecards. We started in 2018, had one in 2018, 2019. We took a break because so many of our bills, as you know, got shelved in 2020, and we came back in 2021. So we've had three sessions where we've had this scorecard. And each year we do 2 legislative champions. Of the 6 legislative champions we've had, 4 of them have been from the Black Caucus. So the first year, both members were from the Black Caucus, and then each year after that, it's been 1 each. And then there's this other statistic I want to throw out at you. So on average, the Black Caucus has roughly a 98 to 99% average on our scorecard, whereas the legislature as a whole is below 90%. So STAR has found some of our greatest allies in the Black Caucus. And I guess I'm just wondering, from your perspective, why do you think that the Black Caucus has been one of our greatest allies? Like, what is it about STAR's mission, which is to support survivors of sexual trauma, resonates to where the Black Caucus seems to be very involved with us?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. Number one, I always brag that the Black Caucus is just the heart and the soul and the conscience of the legislature, right? We have always been leaders in issues, when it comes to protecting women, right? I think that the second piece is we lead from our experiences, and we have had members in the past. We have some current members that have been victims. So we have had a front row seat and have had the opportunity to hear firsthand how the laws have not protected women. I think that the issue, unfortunately, is one that has been, historically an issue in our communities that dates back to when we were brought to this country, right? We were owned by slave masters, and those slave masters raped my ancestors. And, so I think that it's just an issue that we are extremely sensitive to because of, our history. And then a lot of times in our community, victims seem more comfortable going to a STAR than to law enforcement. And you all have been, really helpful in navigating the process, right? There's a lack of trust in government sometimes, especially in, the criminal justice space. So victims, I think that there's also, unfortunately, a sense of embarrassment when these issues happen. And, in our community, I think that when those things happen, we feel more comfortable going to a trusted source, a more community-led avenue, and not just go to law enforcement. So, I think, all of those issues have been why you've seen so much success with your issues with the caucus.
Right. Well, and you bring up a good point too about like criminal justice reform efforts. That's another issue that the Black Caucus has really been a champion for. And one of the things that has sort of struck us is that people believe that survivor advocacy groups like STAR would somehow be against criminal justice reform, because there's this myth that if you're pro-criminal justice reform, you're somehow anti-victim, which we know that's not at all true. And in fact, some of the bills that you actually have attempted to get passed would really help survivors. A lot of people think that pro-criminal justice reform measures are anti-victim, which they're not. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because one of the things I've really been interested in is your clean slate bill that would help trafficking victims immensely, because they have been charged with prostitution and other nonviolent crimes. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
You know, that bill and clean slate is one of the things that I am really I'm saddened by not being able to see that through. This automatic expungement piece, I know, and I didn't even think about it, honestly, until you showed up, right? I never thought about how the bill and some of the other reforms would help, because I don't immediately think about the trafficking piece and how, you know, these young ladies are almost like double victims, right? You know, the system has put them at fault by arresting them for certain things, holding them down, and then those predators have also upended their lives. So that piece and some of the other pieces of legislation that we worked on, you have helped really educate us on how critical those pieces are to victims, right? The clean slate piece, that just automatically being able to wipe those records clean, and a lot of those things, be it disposition or no disposition, I look at it as economic development opportunity, because, you know, we have about 380 plus things in our law that basically say if you were charged with this crime, you can't do this, you can't go here, you can't work here, you can't apply for this. So we are technically really keeping victims out of the workplace. And in some conversations I've had with victims, they've talked about just the lack of financial resources is one of the hindrances, and kept them in an uncomfortable and in a dangerous situation because they didn't have the resources. You know, and some people think that, unfortunately, this is a choice, right? You know, and people, nobody's going to make a choice to continue to be in this type of situation. So, and I've seen that across the spectrum with some of the reform efforts, because you've been a fixture in the community and in, you know, in the committee in criminal justice, and you know, oftentimes put in green cards to support a lot of the bills. And I think that you guys have really helped, because we usually get a really bad rap for talking about criminal justice reform, because people try to make it anti-victim and easy on crime. But, you know, we've shown over the years, you know, we get some of these reform measures passed and we're able to save, you know, a couple $100,000. That funds a lot of the programs that the ladies that come to you desperately need, right? Because we could be spending a lot more money in prevention and trying to help you know, transition as women are escaping some very dangerous situations and trying to get on their own 2 feet.
Right. And I think, you know, one of the things we see here a lot of times at STAR is that people believe justice for survivors is always going to be in the criminal justice system. But like you said earlier, sometimes victims feel more victimized in the criminal justice system. So we try to have, you know, STAR is very pro-survivor, and whatever helps survivors. You know, another bill you did that people were a little shocked with us about was your bill that would expedite charging times for victims. And people were like, well, that's anti-victim, because then people would be let go. And I think it was maybe Richard Nelson or somebody else had mentioned something in the criminal justice committee. They were like, I know when we give people deadlines, they end up meeting the deadlines. And for us, for victims, they are going to meet those deadlines. But what happens now is victims are left wondering, never getting calls from prosecutors or whoever, like, what's happening with this case? And sometimes they move, they don't update, you know, their information. And then you have a case that does disappear because the victim disappeared. And you know, that's another bill that you were working on, which I think it did make it to the finish line, but it was maybe modified quite a bit.
it was changed drastically, and only dealt with you know, misdemeanors. Right. And you know, I looked at it as, you know, someone that has practiced criminal law. You know, unfortunately, and you know, I'll admit this, you know, I have defended folks that have been accused of never any sexual crimes, but you know, a lot of domestic violence, and I've seen it. I've seen cases fall by the wayside because they waited 6 months to contact the victim, and the victim, if you have somebody that's harassing you, one of the first things you're gonna probably do is change your phone number, right? You're gonna move. You're going to make sure that person that is looking for you cannot find you. And unfortunately, that limits a prosecutor's ability. And then I think that the longer time lines would allow them to kind of leave a file on their desk when someone is really out there needing the help that the DA's office will provide. And unfortunately, you got somebody that's accused of something and you get them 90 days. How many other women, are going to be victimized in the 90 days while we're waiting on a DA to pick up a folder, or a police officer to follow through with an investigation. And people usually don't, think about how all these things are related.
Right. Well,
Morgan, I got to step away for 1 second. One second.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. So, all of these bills are still important. We still need them to cross the finish line. And so I'm wondering, now that you are leaving, who do you think will be the one to pick up sort of, what you left off with, and in particular, individuals, if you have any names?
No, I do. Royce Duplessis is going to be huge. Royce has been a leader in his short time. I keep forgetting that Royce has probably only been in the legislature 4 years, right? Because he has just been, such a leader and quickly. And he's someone just like me. We both have young daughters, so these issues are important to us. We both have practiced criminal law, so we've seen the issues, and we live in some very, very similar communities, right? And I've already talked to him, so clean slate. I know he is really going to be pushing that with the bill that we talked about, with just the time to institute and file a bill of information, institute charges. ACLU has been really dynamic in pushing that. I know that Denise Marcel has expressed some interest in it. I don't see anything moving since we've just made a change. I think that it'll be an issue that we're going to have to just kind of take small bites. My bill would have drastically changed things, but the bill highlighted a lot of issues in the system. And, everybody talks about, funding, but our DA's offices are funded. And I'm not saying that, they all have maximum funding. I'm not saying that. But when I look at groups like yours, I know that you guys can benefit from additional help in the areas. I know that public defenders can, and I know that we talk about the crime lab and investigators. Too often, I think we're spending a lot of time sending investigators out for small possessions of marijuana, right? When there are issues like we see right now in Livingston Parish, involving some very powerful people, right? Issues at our flagship university involving some very powerful people. And a lot of those things were swept under the rug. And, I think that when you have 2 or 3 people that only lay eyes on things, it invites that type of injustice when nobody is really paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, and I think Louisiana is a very reactive state. We always react when we're out of compliance, but, I think there's been studies on, if you spend some money on prevention, you're going to save so much money later down the road, but we don't ever seem to sort of shift our mindset, and we don't want to spend the money up front. But kind of moving on to something else that, this whole web series we're calling Policy Over Politics. And it's, one of the things that I've been increasingly disturbed by at the Capitol in recent years has been when basically there are these procedural votes to make political points or statements. And those political points that people are trying to make could kill some very important bills. And usually the bill itself is something that everyone seems to agree on, or, a good majority of them. But, there are those bills that could still end up dead. And when you see stuff like that happening, I mean, has there been any other legislators that you have come to sort of admire for them standing up against their party to vote on the policy and not just the politics?
Yeah, I think that Barry Ivy has by far been one who is just not afraid to speak on the issue. He, during the tax policy debate, I mean, he went down to the well and gave a speech and just basically said, look, we have been talking about tax reform for a year. We had a whole, bipartisan, study group. They advanced several different recommendations, and Barry was one that, and this is why I respect him so much. We have some people, you got some folks in every group, right? And the legislature is no different. Some folks are going to show up and talk, right? You got some folks that are not going to say a word, and you got folks that are, and the folks that don't say a word, they do a lot of work in the background, right? And they are just like soldiers that are always going to do either the right thing, or they are people that they're going to be very consistent. And then there are some people that do it all. They're going to step up, they're going to speak up, they're going to study, they're going to read bills, and they're going to bring their own bills. So that's what Barry did, right? He studied, he listened to everybody, and then he went, and I think he may have filed like 20 some bills that year. And the Republicans were like, look, we're not going to do tax reform because we don't want the governor to get a win. This was before, John Bell was up for re-election. So they were like, look, we're not going to do this to give the governor a win. And he was sick of it, and he went down and gave a speech about it. There are others like, Tanner McGee, who has always, been someone that's good to work with. Joe Stagney, on, issues from policing to, local issues. And that is where, Mark, and I have really seen a lot of frustration where local issues that, folks have absolutely no knowledge of because they don't live in the area. But if one person from the area says, look, I don't like this, and then they're going to go balls to the wall against a local issue because their seatmate, the person in their party said no, and they will follow on a lot of procedural things, and it has complicated the process. Now, of course, I'm not going to say that I haven't been one to use procedural things to defeat things, but just not based on party, right? I think that, I say this all the time, and I'm probably have just been more free in saying it because I know that I was term limited, and now because I'm leaving, everybody's selfish, right? There are some selfish ambitions, but, for me, I felt that the things that I'm selfish about are good for the whole, right? They're good for they're good for the entire community. And, I'm pretty sure some of my colleagues on the other side probably feel the same way. They're wrong, but they probably feel, the same way. And that is, just an unfortunate reality about politics, right? Politics is political. But, there are certain things that should never, right? And I think that, the issues that you guys advocate for, I think largely have been able to stay out of the fray, largely. Right.
Well, and this year we actually on our scorecard graded one of those procedural votes because, and so it was Jason Hughes's bill that would eliminate the prescriptive period for civil claims for child sexual abuse cases. That's an issue unanimous support for.
Yeah.
But when it came time for that procedural vote, it was a vote on the last day of session. So you had to do that procedural vote, and it was like 59 voting for, which, that was a lot of people trying to make a statement. And it just, I do remember Barry Ivy was one who went to the well afterwards, was like, I wasn't going to come up here, but, I felt like I had to after I saw that last vote. And it's like, there are certain things that have just disturbed me that we shouldn't be making political statements when it comes to child sexual abuse survivors.
Yeah, you're right.
And that was really tough to kind of witness,
No, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like that had absolutely nothing to do with the issue. Like it was payback for other things that were going on. But you're right. Like and those are the type of things that lend to the lack of trust that people have in the process.
Right. Well, and I guess kind of shifting to some more positive things. in your time at the legislature, what do you believe has been your greatest legislative accomplishment? And I know you mentioned LA Wallet earlier. I have to say, practically speaking, as a Louisiana citizen, I have to say that has been the most practical, life-saving legislation ever. And I wish we had the ability to do sort of the LA Wallet for the vaccine cards for like my children now. So.
Yeah, people ask me that every day. Yeah, people ask me that every day. Yeah. You know, Morgan, I don't know if I could just pick one thing. I think that, you know, the medical marijuana piece was huge for me in that it was something that we were not even thinking about, right? The law had been on the books, and it was something that honestly nobody wanted to tackle, right? And I started to hear about the people who were literally leaving the state, like to go get medication for their children that were having seizures, right? This, you know, folks that were just in, you know, intractable pain, and really like this was the only thing that they were able to use that gave them comfort. And then, you know, I see people in the grocery store who were released because of a bill that we filed, right? Who have, you know, like I'm back with my family, you know, I'm working again. Like I was able to take advantage of one of these programs because of the reinvestment, and your bill helped me get out early, right? And, you know, so those things I'm extremely proud of. So it's not just, you know, one thing, but and I think it's just, you know, a litany of opportunities that I know have directly like changed people's lives.
And I would have to agree with you. And I mean, a lot of people assume sometimes that, you know, when you're a member of a certain party or certain caucus, you do legislations for specific situations. But, you know, your legislation, I have family members who have been in and out of jail, typically drug related stuff, you know, who have benefited from those different policies. So I thank you for that. And I guess what's something that you will miss most about being in the legislature?
Oh man, I'm really going to miss like the banter, right? Like the back and forth. I'm really going to miss like the education component, because one of the things that I really, when I first got to the legislature, I kept saying common sense is not common. It's just not common here. And people that watch the legislative process probably agree. And, you know, now 10 years in, I recognize that what's common to me isn't common to everybody else. And I especially, like, I hate to keep, you know, the policing piece, like being able to really educate my colleagues on these issues, because we have people that really feel like police officers are right every single time, right? And when I gave that speech on the floor, people really didn't understand, because folks really, just like the police officers were like, oh, we thought you were one of them. The people that I serve with, they look at us in the Black Caucus and think, oh, you're different, right? You're not like the images we see on TV. And but for a relationship here, but for a teacher that made sure that I didn't go one way, you know, but for relationships when I was young and getting in trouble, like I could have easily been one of those folks that they look down on. And, you know, by and large, we have some folks that really just on certain issues don't care. But we do have some folks that I will miss, like times when, like after George Floyd, when my colleagues, some of them called me and was like, you know what, now I get it, right? Or you said this, help me understand, because I just don't see it, right? I have never seen it. I've never encountered it. Help me understand. And I'm going to miss that piece.
Right.
Because I know that folks have really attempted to try to understand my positions, right? I'm not going to miss the, you know, arguing over, you know, whether or not to wear a mask, right? I felt like just over the years, the politics have gotten just so, just so, you know, silly, right? Like to politicize something Especially with COVID, with my experience, and we lost colleagues, and, their families would come, and, you got Steve Carter, he died from COVID. His family comes, and you go up and you're hugging his wife without a mask, and then you go back and you talk about how idiotic some of these policies are. And, it's just that type of hypocrisy I'm not going to miss. But, the process has really been fun. Most people see, and I've thought about this over the past week or so since my resignation has become public. People's like, oh, well, you're a fighter. And I never imagined like that's what folks would say. And like, for me, I think that I have learned how to take a punch better than I could throw one. and that is, one of the things that I hope that my colleagues can recognize, that it's not about just being able to go and throw punches. It's about taking one, because the process it always swings back and forth. And, there have been some bills that we've gone down to the wire, and we've killed some bills that need to be killed. But that definitely, like my clean slate bill, right? That, last year in 2020, we came in and I killed a bill from the chairman of Senate Finance, and then my clean slate bill got killed. So, that's part of the process. But, I will tell you, as much as I like clean slate and I can't wait for it to be law, that bill that we killed would have been very problematic, so it was worth it.
Right. And sometimes, what is that saying that happens at the Capitol? Good legislation takes years to get through. Bad legislation typically gets passed, first time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, what words of advice or wisdom do you want to share with your legislative colleagues before you leave? Because that is something, I have really enjoyed your floor speeches at times. I think a lot of us, you've gone viral, I think, a couple of times, and we're all like sharing it on Instagram and stuff. And you really like help us sometimes, like when things are just not feeling good, like you say what we're all thinking. I hope somebody will also have that sort of passion that you've brought to the table. And I think you do educate people in a way that is diplomatic, because I think I've told you this before. I somehow ended up with one of your law books. I went to Southern University Law Center, and the greatest gift was to go there, because as a white person, being in a classroom with a very diverse classroom during criminal procedure, and you're hearing stories from your colleagues of firsthand experience. But as a white person, if I never got that experience, I wouldn't analyze things in the same way without having the perspective, that shared perspective, and you've been able to educate people in a way that I think it doesn't just shame them or something. You really do go to the mic and educate people about, this is what's real for me. And you may not see it, but I guess any words of wisdom for your colleagues?
Yeah, I think that I would go back to reminding them that, what's common to you may not be common to the person sitting next to you. And when you run for office, like I have really voted on bills that are against my interests, right? Especially with marijuana stuff, right? Like I make money from people getting arrested for marijuana. But I think that the policy is horrible. And I think that, once you decide that you want to represent the people in the legislative capacity, you have to stop thinking about what's good for my child, my grandchild, my business, right? And think about what's good for the whole. And most people don't understand that. And I think that it is a combination of term limits. And I'm still one that I've seen what happened when term limits kicked in, but I'm not going to say that I think we should go back. But I think that people don't know the difference between campaigning and governing. And that's what I want my colleagues to understand, is that we go in these campaigns, and the first thing we do is we talk about how bad it is, and everybody's corrupt and everybody's wrong, and I'm going to be the one person to go down there and change it. one person can't get a single resolution passed with just one, right? So I would hope that folks recognize that there's a time to govern and a time to campaign, right? And then recognize and respect the differences that we all bring to the table. And I think that even for me, I've learned even in my delivery, I have learned to be forceful and educate at the same time, as opposed to just being forceful, right? And you have to make things very plain for folks and put it where they can feel it, right? And for me, I think lastly, I would say that it is, remember that it's not about you personally, it's about the work. Like with that medical marijuana piece, I tell people this story all the time. When we were pushing the bill, I had one and Fred Mills had a bill too. And the first time I walked into House Health and Welfare and they killed my bill. A week later, Fred Mills walks in and he makes his bill look very much like mine, and then they pass it. And it really pissed me off because, I made it about a lot of different things. I was like, okay, he's a Republican, right? He's white, right? He's older. And I never really thought about the fact that he was a pharmacist. So he may have been the better person to carry the bill. So that was when I realized that if it was not about me and my ego, then I would not have been mad, because it didn't matter whose bill passed, the people were able to get the medication. And that is a hard thing to realize and remind yourself that it's not about you. It's about the work. And you can have your impression on things that your fingerprints aren't on and still feel good about them happening. So, and that's what folks need to recognize. And unfortunately, I don't think members are there long enough to get to the point where they recognize that.
Right. Well, that's really good advice, though. I like that. I think that egos sometimes get in the way of a lot of progress at the Capitol.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really good advice. But all right, well, let's kind of shift. I am curious. So when I was telling a few people here and there that I was going to be interviewing you, of course, they're like, oh, well, you're going to ask them about the new position. It's like, well, we had scheduled this way before, but I'll try to sneak that in. But I guess, Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing in your new position?
Yeah, so I am going to be a regional administrator for the SBA. So high level, overseeing all of the SBA programs in Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. There are 10 different district offices, one in each state outside of Texas. Texas has 6. So I will, overseeing our grant programs, overseeing the loan programs. Folks have asked me already about, loan forgiveness and, from the 2016 flood. That's still a policy decision that's going to be up for the Congress to decide. Now, of course, I will advocate for those things. I will just at heart, this is more of an administrative role, but of course, I'm never going to be able to not be the advocate in any position that I take. One of the things that I've recognized is I've seen a lot of programs, and I've been studying a lot of the different programs, and I'm looking at the participation in our state. Of course, I have to look at the whole region, but, I am Louisiana through and through. So I want to make sure that we know, our businesses know about these programs. And I know a lot of times with the federal government, some business owners look at, and we saw this with the Main Street Recovery Program when we tried to pass this after COVID. There's just some paperwork that a business owner say, you know what, I'm not even going to bother with it, right? It's too much, it's too convoluted, it's too complicated. So being able to simplify those things to the best extent possible. The president and the administrator have all laid out a goal of increasing the percentage of contracts that go to women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. I'm going to do my damnness to make sure that my region leads in that. I want to make sure that small businesses have an opportunity to grow, and especially with, you got the infrastructure bill that is going to be huge for Louisiana. Small businesses should be at the table and be able to make sure that they're participating there. So I'm going to be working my damnness to make sure that happens. And that businesses that want to do business with the federal government and don't have the requisite paperwork, we're going to try to make sure that they have what they need to be able to participate.
Does the position require you to move to DC, or you'll be able to stay here?
No, I'm staying. Yeah,
I'm sure it's a lot of travel, but
yeah, it's a lot of travel. The office is the district office is in Fort Worth, but we do have an office in New Orleans. So not moving, but I will be doing a significant amount of travel.
Well, we're gonna miss you, and hopefully you'll still be able to stop by, at the Capitol every now and then, because trust Ted is still a good saying.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss it. 16 years, since the fall of 2006, I have been involved in every session since then. So it's gonna be rough to know that the legislature is convening and not be there, right?
Right. Well, do you have any idea who will potentially replace you as the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee or the Black Caucus?
I don't. I hope that for criminal justice, I hope that it's a Democrat. I'll tell you that.
Of course.
We have some members who I know have expressed interest. I think all of them would be good. We also need to make sure that we lost two members. We lost Fred Jones earlier, and now with me leaving, we were already 7-5, and now we're 7-3. So I think that we gotta the speaker. I would hope that he puts. I know that one of the new reps, Alicia Boyd, has expressed interest in being on criminal justice. I hope that he appoints her there. And as far as the Black Caucus, there are a few folks that have expressed interest, but I'll let them decide that. I want to stay completely out of it. I think I hope that whomever takes over can continue what we were able to accomplish. When I took over as chair, we had about $3,000 in our PAC, and now we have over 150,000. We were able to triple the amount of scholarships, and we're able to really bring in a lot of new donors and through our foundation and some different events. We were really started to do. We had an event at La B, which is unheard of, right? And while I know that La B probably is not supportive of our PAC, I know that they were supportive of scholarships, and the fact that we were giving scholarships to folks that are in the community and technical college system, and we were really trying to push some folks that we knew that were doing some dual enrollment. So being able to find some common ground there and to use our foundation as a resource to help people. I hope whoever the next chairman or chairwoman is, they keep some of those things in mind.
Which I'm sure they will. I got my Christmas card from the Black. Y'all are always good with the marketing and everything. I'm always getting those. But so we're just about finished. We're gonna do a few questions from the Proust questionnaire. Have you ever heard of that?
Nope.
It's just let's go with it.
All right.
And if you can't think of anything, we'll move on.
All right.
But, these are just some fun, let's everyone know Ted James kind of questions. Okay. So the first one I have for you is, which living person do you most admire?
Oh man, my dad. My dad, when I was younger, I hated the fact that I didn't have my own name. I was like, why don't I have my own name? My mom, I was like, why didn't you guys give me my own name? And I just really, now I really appreciate the fact that he allowed me to share his name. Most folks don't know, when I ran for office, my dad was incarcerated. My dad went to law school and never passed the bar. So it's just, and he made sure that I made the choice. Like, he didn't force anything on me. He was like, look, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna do everything that I can in my power to give you access to things. I wanted to play soccer. My dad knew nothing about soccer. He became a soccer coach because that's something I wanted to do. So he is the person I most admire.
That's really nice. Okay, so which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Oh man, I think that I overuse, and this is bad. I tell people all the time, like, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. I say that way. I've said it politically, but and it's usually a little punchline politically, but I've started to use it in my personal life, and that's probably not the best thing. Although
I have to say, whenever I've heard that being used politically, it usually comes it comes at like such
the right time. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What is one of your greatest regrets in life?
Oh, I think one of my, I can't say that. One of the things that if I could do differently, I would have professionally, I would have done more to like learn how to be a lawyer when I got out of law school instead of jumping right into the politics. And I had an opportunity when I worked for Blanco because I was not classified. I still had an opportunity to practice law on the side, and I ignored opportunities that I had to really learn under other attorneys because I just kind of wanted to go and do it by myself. But if I could do it over again, I would have really like left the Capitol and gone to a law office to, and spent hours at night learning how to practice law.
Yeah, that is the one thing in law school, like you don't exactly know, you're not really taught law office practice.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, what is one talent you would most like to have?
Oh, I wish I could cook. Like I really, yeah, I am not the best cook at all, right? And I go back and forth. I had somebody asked me that a couple of weeks ago. It's between cooking and singing, right? But like I think that like 80% is cooking and the other 20 is singing.
Yeah, I think I cannot cook either. And it's not because like I can't follow a recipe, it's because I just don't want to. Like I want to go do something else. I want to read something else. I get distracted. But people have this assumption that if you're from Louisiana, you can cook. And like if you go anywhere else, I'm sure people are going to be, you're going to meet all kinds of people as you're traveling. They're going to be asking you for your gumbo and jambalaya.
Yeah. I'm like, look, you're asking the wrong person. When I was younger, I remember my parents used to have this debate. Like my mom would say, what is more important, that we eat or that I cook? And I think that I heard that so much that like for me, like I don't care if I cook it, as long as I'm fed, I'm good. And now I only really cook because of Harper. Like but she's so easy, like spaghetti and
4 years old,
chicken
right?
and macaroni is I'm good. Yeah.
Chicken nuggets, pizza, macaroni and cheese. I have a 4-year-old too, and that's their diet for sure.
That's right.
Okay, so this one, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh man, perfect happiness is waking up, every day and being able to provide for your family and not feel like you had to go to work, right? Just having everything that you need and not feeling like you had to work, right? Like just really enjoying what you do to provide for your family is just, there's nothing else more gratifying. And I think just, brings that level of excitement, just being able to have everything you need and not feel like you had to work.
Right. No, that's definitely perfect happiness and being with your family,
That's right. Yeah.
Doing all those things.
Yeah.
Although, I always see your post about Harper and she seems like the perfect angel. And I'm wondering sometimes, I'm like, my 4-year-old is not the perfect angel.
She ain't. She's not. Trust me. Yeah, she is not. Like Harper is, the feisty person that you see me be at the legislature. She is that at 4, right? Like she is. I could ask her to do something and she will say, I don't feel like it. And when she says it, she absolutely means it. And and she's very hard to get mad at.
Yeah, she's adorable. But well, thank you so much for being the first one to do this. I know sometimes people are like, okay, what is this you're doing, before they agree to it. So of course you have never met a challenge you haven't faced head on. So I really appreciate you doing this for us. Like I said, it's a web series that we're doing. I'm really excited about it, and I'm hoping that it will educate different legislators. And I'm really glad that, I got to do it with you right before you leave. You were the first person I asked anyway, and this is before I knew. So, but
when you asked me, I was like, because I knew it was coming. I was like, well, maybe I'll still be around. I don't know yet. but I'm gonna do it anyway because Morgan, you have been a friend, and I look forward to watching you and Star continue to do good things. Like I said, I'm transitioning, but I'm not leaving.
Right. And I'm glad you aren't, because we still need that passion, your voice to be around. And obviously, especially in Baton Rouge, and obviously I'm biased, I'm in Baton Rouge, and
yeah.
Some of those local things you were kind of alluding to, I'm like, yeah, that was Baton Rouge. So,
yeah.
But thank you so much. And is there anything else you want to say as we wrap things up?
No, I just remind, the folks that will be participating and watching this, your power is showing up, and don't be intimidated by the legislative process. And just like, kind of Morgan talked about the, bills, sometimes it won't happen the first year, right? And it takes continuing to go back, and, unfortunately, and your issues are a little bit different, but not everybody has the same type of passion, and that's something that for advocates, you guys have to remember. Not everybody has gone through it, right? Not everybody has a sister or a niece or a friend that has gone through it. So your passion may not be matched with someone else. And I know for me, I've talked to advocates before, and that has been something that has been difficult as they've tried to manage the process. And it doesn't matter, the lobbyists or the interest group on the other side, just come in and tell your story, and folks are going to listen.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And that's all we have time for. So
thank you, Morgan.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right.